As you know, I'm Kainton, the Tech Pro, and today we are going to start from part 6 of our CQRS with Axon framework tutorial. Today we are going to be building the summary projection, more like the data representing a list of a collection of aggregates or a collection of gift cards that we'll be able to query and display on a grid view in the user interface. So just to review, let's just run this application, because in the last step, in the part 5, I did not test it just to make sure everything is fine. So I'm going to just run it now. Let's just make sure everything is fine before we continue. Again, if you are joining me for the first time, I'd like to recommend you subscribe to my channel by clicking on the subscribe button below this video. So let's wait for it to start up at this point. So let's see. So one thing I would like to also mention as an advice for you, if this has been difficult for you since part 5, because part 5 and part 6, we are simply going to be writing the codes. Not much of user interface stuff. We are not actually going to see the grid view, the grid displayed until part 7. That is after this part I'm making right now. Then in part 7, we actually will test the application to display the data on the grid view on the user interface. Alright, so what are we going to be learning today? While we wait for this to start, let's just look at what we are going to be learning today. So in this part, we will create the summary projection class. This class will be part of the query package, and this will be a Spring Bean annotated with at component annotation, and will be responsible for handling persistence, basically to save data into the data store, and we'll be able to query this data. So it will be able to save data. Also, it should retrieve data from the database to be displayed on the grid view in the GUI. All right. So there are 14 steps we are going to be following at this point. And the first step, actually, we are going to be creating a class in the query package. We are going to be calling this class the summary projection. Now, Tomcat started at port 8080, so it means everything is fine. So let's just refresh just to make sure we don't carry over any problems from the previous part. So let's say we issue a new card. Let's say, right. So let's issue just to make sure it's fine. Submit 1,000 units. Success. All right. So perfectly good. So let's go ahead to get started. So I'm going to stop this from running at this point, and I'm going to create a new class in the query package. The class is going to be called summary projection. This time is not going to be a Kotlin file, but a Java class, because for many of us, of course, it's easy for us to use Java. So we use Kotlin so that we actually write data classes. I've explained this before. I've made a mistake in the name, so let me just call it summary projection, and I'm simply going to more action. I should be able to rename the file, so you should know how to solve simple problems like renaming. We are going to annotate this class with as component annotation, so it's going to be a Spring Bean, and we need to add a private variable, the entity manager, because we are going to be using JPA in this class. So I'm going to private final entity manager, All right, so it's fine. Of type entity manager, okay, that is fine. So we are going to just create a constructor, easy to use this. So let me just use add constructor parameter. So perfect. So we actually have completed step 1 to 4. Step 5, create event handlers for issued event and redeemed event. Create query handlers to return a list of card summaries, and create query handler for handling size queries. So alright, so I'm going to say public void handle. I also mentioned sometimes it's better to just type it out yourself instead of copying it out, instead of copying and pasting, because in this way you kind of improve in your programming skills. So issued events, so not issue event but issued event, and that is fine. Right, issued event, so it's adding a second event. All right, so this is one, and this is going to be an event handler. Event handler. So permit me to just copy and paste the remaining one so that we don't actually waste any time. Let me just copy and paste this. So 2 event handlers, 2 query handlers. Remember, this is not 2 event handlers and 2 event sourcing handlers. So we are creating query handler this time. I'm going to just import the class as well as import the class for this, and redeem the event as well. I'm going to import the class. All right. So the query handlers is actually going to be returning, in this case, list of card summary, and the second one is going to be returning the number of items in the list. All right. So let's see how we can implement this method. For the issued event, you need to create and persist a new entity. So when an event is issued, when an issue event is sent, we are going to create a new gift card and save it in the database. All right. So let me just cross-check and make sure everything is fine. So far so good. All right. So let's go ahead to create a new card summary and then we save it. So I'm going to do all this in just one line. So when an event is issued, I'm going to say entity manager dot persist, and I'm going to persist. Let me just do this in a new line, or maybe in the same line, or a new line. New card summary, new card summary dot get ID dot get amount, and get amount again because this is the first time the card is issued. So the initial balance, the initial amount, and the remaining balance, all of them is going to be, both of them is going to be the same thing. For the redeemed event, you need to first find the card summary and then update its balance as shown. So for the redeemed events, we are going to first find the card summary. So I'm going to say card summary. Summary, let's call it summary, is equal to entity manager dot find. So we are going to find a card summary that has the ID of the event. So I'm going to say I'm going to find card summary class, and the ID is going to be okay. So we are going to find these cards, this very card summary, and then we are going to update the remaining balance of this card summary. So I'm going to say summary dot set remaining balance. Set remaining balance is summary dot get remaining balance minus the amount for the issue for the redeemed event. So I'm going to say evt dot get amount. So we are simply going to be subtracting the amount. Okay. So I would like to move on. So the next thing, step 10. This step 10 is very important, but I don't really know exactly how to explain it in plain terms. It's called we need to configure tracking event processor. So more like some kind of listener that listens to event that happens. So you do this by creating an empty config method, and it takes an event processing configuration as parameter. This is shown below. So so let me just do that. Let me just do that at this point. Let's see. So let me do it here. I'm going to say public void event processing configuration config. We call it config, and so that's that. So I'm gonna annotate this with auto wireads. All right. So in this case, we've configured a tracking event processor. You always need to do this if you're handling events that has to be persisted, where the data is going to be persisted on a data store. So now let's now write the code, or let's now implement the query handlers. For the lists query handler, you need to create a query that returns a list of cat summaries using the create query method of the entity manager, and the code is given below. So I'm going to come here and say return entity manager dot create query. So the query is going to be simple transact SQL query select C from card summary C order by C.id, right? So, and then we specify the type we want to return. So we need to return card summary as class. Right. I hope everything is fine. And oh no, so I'm going to simply say dot get. This time we need a list of items. I'm going to get result list, get result list. Okay, so far so good, right? So for the query handler for size query, we're also going to write a query that returns the count of items in the list. So I'm going to simply do almost exactly the same thing. I'm going to return entity manager does create query and do the transact SQL statement select. This time I'm going to be selecting count C, oh, not count C from card summary C. So that's all. In this case, we just have the count. So and we need to return a numeric value. So let's use long. All right. So I'm going to just say dot get single result list because we only need the counts and we convert it to an integer value. And this is just it. So at this point, we are done with the cat summary, the summary projection, and now we need to worry about getting this data into the GUI. So basically, what we've written is more like the service. If you know about business service in MVC, we've basically written the service. So you can actually send queries here, and this query can get the list of items or list of gift card summaries, and also get the size, and we can also issue events that will update the remaining balance on the data store or in the event store, right? All right, so we are going to run the application and make sure everything is fine, and we're also going to start the Axon server, which we already did. But just for review, you have the complete code right here in my website. So you can actually copy this code. If you have any issues, that's when you have any challenges, you can simply copy this code. For now, I think everything is fine, so I'm going to simply save everything and run everything as well, just to make sure everything is okay. So just as a reminder, if it becomes a bit tough for you, no problem. Just keep moving along. There's no problem. With time, it becomes clearer. That is the way you learn. So don't think it's going to be very easy. The reason is because the CQRS and event sourcing way of programming seems to be a bit challenging initially, since it's a new way of doing things. I promise you that if you don't give up, then with time everything becomes very, very, very clear. So you can see that it's connecting and connected to Axon server. Let's see. So blah 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 blah. All right. So I think Tomcat started at 8080. So everything is perfectly okay. So we are now ready to move on to part 7, where we are going to grab this list of items and display it on the GUI and be able to view it. I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we see you in part 7.